So first, probably I would like to start with Shailesh, with you. You have spent decades with data, AI, and stuff. So the first question is like when we are talking about AI, the first thing comes to my mind is data. And in India, everybody says data is in abundance. But actually, good data and bad data are something which is always a concern. So when any innovator, any startup, or anyone who is building a new product, what suggestions you have, like how he can, what principles he should follow to extract the right kind of data so that he can train his algorithm in the right way and build the best possible product. So what is your suggestion and what is your thought process around those lines?
Good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for inviting us. So, I think of data as the pantry of, if you've seen MasterChef Australia, the first thing that the chefs do is go to a pantry where there is beautiful vegetables and meat and everything. And if the pantry is not good, the dish is never going to be good, right? So think of data as the pantry of data science. And obviously, we talk about data. If you think about the origin of data, right, the first data was created not for data science and AI use cases, but for debugging your software, right? The first outcome that created was debugging was the first use case of data. Then dashboard was the second use case of data. And now data science is the third use case of data. Now the data that was created back then, 20 years ago for debugging is not the quality that we need in data science. So I think there's a big gap between data created for one purpose and data actually needed for another purpose. So I think there's a very big quality gap. And there are now automated algorithms to determine the data hygiene, the quality issues, the obfuscation and PII issues. There are a lot of such data issues that need to be cleaned up before data is ready for the next stage. And, we are in the era of what we call a data products now, which are supposed to do two very important things with data. One is to abstract data from technology. Right. And make data domain-centric. If a farmer wants to know what is the forecast tomorrow, he doesn't care about whether you have stored that data in this table or that table, right? He's doing a query at a domain level. So how do we create data as an abstract layer of APIs at a domain-centric without thinking about technology at the bottom? And second is standardization. If you think of what standardization has done, 4G, 5G, 3G, MPEG, JPEG, these are all standards. Without standards, we would not be able to do any of that stuff. Similarly, data needs to be standardized. What does a standard data look like for, every domain? And there are data models coming up.
Right.
And the last point I want to make is, if you think about what is data, for Google, one part of data is the whole internet. But the more important part of data for Google is the click feedback that it is receiving. So what is data? Data is not just the raw thing. Data is also the feedback that you receive. The data is also the reviews and ratings. The data is also the features that you build from raw data. The data is also the labels that you get. The data is also the metrics that you compute. The data is also the decisions you have made in the past. The data is also the inferences that have come from AI models. So when we think of data, data is a very broad spectrum. Abstract it, make it complete, and OpenAI spent 10 years cleaning up their data before they got the algorithm to do what it does, and we see the results of it. So it's a very hard work, and the word data mining was coined just for that reason, because we realized data quality is very poor, and it has to be mined like you mine the gold out of ore before you can make a necklace out of it. So that's the spirit, and obviously it's a friend, but it's a very difficult friend. So we have to work on it a lot before we get a right model out. Yeah. Thank you.
Sure, absolutely. So Rajesh, coming back to you, you work with, you can take this mic probably.
Yeah.
So you work with the multinational, you have, in your past, you have worked with big companies. And you are also, I understand, see and mentor with startups and innovators. For you, like from a big corporation perspective, data, having access to data is one thing, but how are you looking at it from a security perspective? How you make sure that the data is secure? Or do you think the security of big corporations is restricting the access of easy data that they can get? So what are your thoughts around data access and data accessibility for big corporation versus the startups or the innovators?
Yeah, good question. So what we need to first understand is the problem pertaining to the data access and data democratization cannot be solved overnight. If you see it in the context of a public LLM or a private LLM. So I would like to see it in two different buckets. If you look at the public LLM, the way the public LLMs are developed is you do a web crawl of the data, get the data from the open databases without validating whether whatever data that is getting generated in the public domain is valid or not. It goes into the data and then it creates the hallucination problem. Then you come back and then through the what we call as the reinforcement learning through human feedback, you correct that particular data. So this has to change over a period of time. And for that to change, you need a wide ecosystem-wide interventions where you have to bring in aspects like data provenance, data democratization, and how do you monetize that particular data in a rightful way. Once you have the superstructure of these elements in place, whether the data being accessed by a big corporate or a small corporate automatically gets addressed. Today, nobody is spending significant amount of time in correcting that foundational input, right? If you look at the presentation the previous speakers did, he started from bottoms up, where he looked at the compute layer and went to the data layer. But if you are a person focusing on developing the LLM, the basic input, the foundational input, the primordial input is going to be data. That's where you need these wide interventions, which are not going to come overnight, because we are currently in a scenario what we call as the Web 2 or Web 2.5, where the prosumer aspect is not come into account, where the person who produces the data can monetize and also consume the data. That systematic shift cannot happen until and unless we herald into what I call as Web 3.0, where the data provenance is established right from the source from where the data gets created. You don't have today the visibility across the ecosystem from the source to consumption, how that particular data is going to be modified. So that's the first thing that is required. Now coming to an organizational context, even in a large organization, there's no data democratization. How many times have we seen an organization where one unit in an organization has more access to the data and another unit in the organization does not have the access to the same data sets?
Right.
So the data democratization needs to be brought into place, which will come with tectonic shifts in the technology, like whether it's a distributed ledger technology or a blockchain kind of an implementation, where you create what we call as a single source of truth, and you also validate every piece of data that gets generated, even in an organizational context. You know, it's not necessary that in an organizational context all the data is valid and sane, right? There are intentional and unintentional human errors which kind of corrupt the data. So you have to correct those mechanisms also. So once you correct at a wider ecosystem level, and second you correct at an enterprise level, what you're talking about can be accomplished easily.
Thank you, absolutely, and can't agree more on that thought. But coming on to the next topic, to Jankiram, to you, when we are talking about data and everything, the just adding to what Rajesh mentioned, like there is something which is of pertinent importance is ethics around AI, and it is not just around data, but also the models that we are building, whatever we are doing. So that's what we call responsible AI, ethics around AI, and different terminologies are coming on. Now, obviously, there are a lot of regulations and processes are coming. Like EU recently, or some time back, they have launched their regulations. Now, there are a lot of businesses also started popping up who are working with them on compliances and all this thing. So, what is your thought process in terms of, is it just more like a new business stream that is getting up in the market, or some actual work is happening, or if it is happening, like which all areas India as a country should focus on? So because we are vulnerable from multiple aspects, we are not like EU or other people. So if I have to ask you very precisely, like for India or for Bharat, what should be the ethical strategy, or responsible AI strategy. So your thoughts, Janaki, over that?
Right. So currently there is a scarcity of data, right? Which means to train these large language models, data is ingested from wherever, whatever is the source. So whether it is social media or blogs or Reddit threads or Stack Overflow, whatever is available in the public domain is being siphoned into training these large language models. And the biggest risk with that is the biases that we carry as individuals, as citizens, as society, whatever is being written about, whatever is being spoken about publicly on the internet is going to be the data on which the models are going to be trained. The knowledge, the cultural bias that these LLMs carry are a true reflection of what we as individuals, societies, towns, countries actually think of, because that is what is being used to train this. So getting the cultural aspect of LLMs is very critical, because you cannot use a model that is trained with a large data set that doesn't belong to you for your internal purposes. There is going to be a significantly different cultural issue that you're going to deal with. So if I have to call out one thing, it's very important for any country, including India, to understand the cultural impact of data on models and create approaches. For example, synthetic data is going to be an approach. So the models are becoming so powerful that the AI models are going to be used to generate new data. That is not very difficult. So I think the future of data, and particularly the policies around data governance, is using AI to generate the data that is ethical, that is unbiased, that is neutral, that is culturally sensitive, to train new models. So I think in India it's very important to bring that diversity and cultural aspect as a policy and as something that is considered right from day zero when we are building the entire AI strategy and the AI stack.
But Janki, for a startup, how he should look at it?
This is not a problem with the startup. This is not a problem with a platform company. This is the problem that got to be solved by the AI governance that the government is going to set up. This is a policy decision that needs to happen at a very high level, rather than a startup or a data platform or a developer platform worrying about it. It is nothing to do with that. This is the policy that has to be baked at the highest level of the governance.
Yeah, Rajesh, you want to share?
Just to add to that, in terms of what is responsible AI.
Right.
Responsible AI does not mislead people, does not use data in objectionable manner, and then gives credit to people whose data has gone into it. And if you look at the communication minister who made a statement, when they come back to the power, they're going to pass a legislation wherein they're going to say that LLM generator or the LLM model maker has to incentivize the publisher of data whose data has gone into the LLM. Now, do we have a framework for that? No, we don't have a framework for that.
Right.
So you had left that to an imagination, because there is no tech framework for that. There is no operational framework for that, nor there is a code of practice for that. So for that, it again dovetails back to what I said before from a data democratization perspective. If you don't have the foundational tech stack to enable the data democratization, how will the legislation is going to work? Ultimately, what is going to happen, the lawyers are going to have a field day, because the LLM guy is going to dispute, saying that I have not used the data. The publisher is going to prove that he or she has used the data. So it's going to, unleash a lot of litigation and various other things. So one, get the tech stack in place. Two, have the operational framework in place, and then establish a code of practice. Then responsible AI works. Otherwise, it's just a glorified statement.
Right, absolutely. So Shailesh, coming back to you, you have been working towards a lot of things which you have mentioned about AI for India, AI for Bharat. So, in your scheme of things, as Janki and Rajesh just now highlighted, the importance of responsible AI, and also from the policy side, how government or any of these bodies need to play a role. You are working in one of the largest corporations of India, like one of the Indians' largest organization called Jio. What you or your organization is doing around it, is it mostly like you are also still waiting for the policies to come in place, or you are doing some initiatives from your side in those lines?
So, we are very proactive about many issues that we foresee will come. So
Right.
one is we are also contributing to the regulatory framework. I'm sure all of us are giving inputs and all of that. But from day one, we are very conscious about, most important is privacy, right? We have access to phone numbers of people, and that leads to Aadhaar card and many other things. So we are very conscious about, privacy is a very top issue for us. And, everything we do, we obfuscate and make sure that privacy is always preserved, and only a court order can undo the privacy clause, right? So that is very important. And we make sure that all our models not only are bias free, but also privacy preserved. And, and for us, responsible AI is not an afterthought. We have built a model, now let's test whether it is unbiased or not. We are now building frameworks which are unbiased first, responsible first AI modeling frameworks we are now coming up with. So those are some of the things we are doing. Going back to the previous issue, I'll just give 3 anecdotal examples of how I learned my, responsible AI lessons, right? So my first lesson was after 9/11, we built a model for the Department of Homeland Security, where the model was taking all the travel data of all the US citizens, including name, places, driver license, everything. And we were mining that to find, behavior of terrorism. And there was a big lawsuit between, Homeland Security and UCLA. And they talked about, privacy versus security. So beautiful debate. And at the end of the debate, Supreme Court decided that privacy is even more important than national security. That is what they said. Privacy is even more important than national security, and you cannot collect travel data of people to just prevent the next 9/11, right? So that's a very big lesson for me, that how important, even within a year of 9/11, people still think privacy is more important than security. That is a very important lesson. Second lesson I learned is, as technologists, we get very excited about what we are doing. So I built a very nice auto suggestion system for Gmail. Gmail does not have a very good auto suggestion in Google. So I said I could mine the Gmail data of every user and build an auto suggestion for that user that only that user can see. And then when it went for a legal review, they said, no, this is going to create a big problem, because if I am a user, I'm looking at my auto suggestion, which is very private conversation, showing up in auto suggestion, that will give a perception to the end user that Google is reading my Gmail, which is not true. We are reading machines are reading it, not humans. Even that is not acceptable, right? So that got cancelled. So sometimes we get carried away by great technology ideas, but we forget about how the end user will perceive it, or somebody could misuse it. Third example, at Ola, we had an opportunity to mine your SMS data to build a credit score for Ola Money, and we had a very big debate about that. We didn't first say, can we do it? The first question was, should we do it? Right. And we said, no, today we will access your email, SMS. We will all leave the company. Tomorrow somebody will come and start misusing it. So we cut the possibility of a future misuse on day one itself, and we said we are never going to do this kind of a thing, right? SMS-based credit models, for example. So these are very important lessons I have learned, that there is a line which is sometimes very blurry. You don't know when you're going to cross the privacy line, and then you're going to start to misuse that, knowingly, unknowingly. The model will pick it up, you won't know. So I think we have to be very careful with these issues. And beyond privacy now, bias and others have come up. And those should not be an afterthought. They should be baked into our data strategy, our modeling strategy, our deployment and everything else. And we should be very, because like they said, with great powers come great responsibility. Yeah?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
So, continuation to that thought process, we covered responsible AI, we covered data. Your thoughts in around data accessibility and democratization of data. Coming back to the if I have to talk about the elephant in the room or the compute issue that all of us are talking about. So you are in Geo, you are sitting, and this is a joint question for both Shailesh and Rajesh. Like now, both of you come from big organizations, right? You don't have the dearth of money as such, right? So how big is the compute problem in real sense for you? Is it just a made-up problem, or do you really think that the cost is extremely high and really there is lack of access, and is it like a real problem in sense? So just want to understand, like, if any of you can go first, right?
So, Geo is managing some of the largest data sets in the world, right? If you think about 500 million people, all of the telecom data of that, right? Like every call generates some data, right? Or the retail data, right? And all the media data and all of that. So I think we have been managing very, very large data centers already,
right?
During telecom and all that. And now, Mr. Ambani's vision is that, look, we have brought down the cost of communication through, Geo as a telecom. And now the next big battle is the cost of compute. And that has to be brought down. And there are two ways to do it. One is we manufacture our own compute in India, which will take 10 years for us to mature. Or we host compute from outside and reduce the cost of managing a data center, right? The energy is the new cost, if you will. And, if we integrate energy backward and say, how do we use solar energy and all of that to run large data center, reduce the cost of compute, is one more dimension. And, you guys have very nice startups in the compute space. And a lot of compute innovation are coming. Recently, they announced, 5x better compute, or, quantum is coming. So I think compute innovation will keep happening. Cost will keep coming down as requirements go up. But today there is a very big gap between supply and demand. And that is what, everybody in the government, in the industry is recognizing that India is lacking in that, and we need to catch up on that. But I think this is also an opportunity for startups to look at low compute alternatives to doing AI, right? And what does that mean? ISRO versus NASA, right? And I think there's a lot of innovation that can be done on low compute, deep learning, and Gen AI.
Absolutely.
And we should treat it in that spirit also.
Sure.
Thank you.
So, Rajesh, to add on that, how many of your team members or your colleagues you have seen are using H100s? So you can add that in your answer.
Yeah,
right?
Definitely. Before that, I wish if AI could delay the hunger of many people over there so that they could sit here and listen to the session. So that's a wish list on the AI, right? So now in terms of the compute perspective, I would like to slightly alter your question. Compute from a first mover advantage perspective and compute from an optimal requirement perspective. If you're bringing in the equation of a first mover advantage, yes, access to compute creates, it doesn't create a leveling field for all the people. Big organizations vis-a-vis startups. But all hope is not lost. Many people are under the perception that you would need GPU of a particular OEM to run your LLM model. How many of us know that you can run an LLM model on TPU? And tensor processing units from Google have been there for quite some time, number one. Number two, CDAC today gives access to compute at a much lower price. And I say that with confidence because in my previous company, when the then MD and CEO CP Gurnani had taken the challenge from Sam Altman to build a grounds-up LLM model in Hindi, we were the first, that group was the first group which built the Hindi LLM grounds up. And that point of time also compute was a big challenge. I got a quote from that particular OEM where I thought they misplaced 3 or 4 zeros extra in that quote because it was prohibitive. But did we stop the journey? No, we did not stop the journey. We pivoted it on TPU, tensor processing units. A large extent can be done on TPUs. Second, we found alternate sources like CDAC which were able to give it at a much lower price. Now you have people like Yota. Yota is promoted by a classmate of mine from Columbia Business School, Sunil. Now he's taken on the task of bringing those NVIDIA A100s or whatever it is into India, and now he's converting it on a pay-as-you-go model or on a demand model, right? Yota guys are now going full steam into the marketplace and telling those companies, saying that you work on our particular compute. Yeah, from a PwC perspective, we've spent globally $2 billion to make AI accessible not only to employees at PwC but also to our clients. But it was not, entire thing was pivoted purely on compute perspective. The various methods of using, we have chat PwC, which is to be used in the organization, which is a morphed version of ChatGPT. We've taken ChatGPT and then we changed it from an enterprise context and enable the access. So if you consider these components, then compute is not an actual problem. And the history tells us, for example, in 1980, if you had to buy 1 GB of storage from IBM, it would have given you $30,000-$40,000 as a bill for 1 GB of storage. Today you pay a fraction of cent for that one particular GB. So it is going to change over a period of time. Yes, from a first mover advantage, it does create unfair field, but that doesn't deter you from looking for alternatives. There are enough alternatives today which are already available from a PSU as well as a non-PSU environments.
Thank you, Rajesh. So as a closing remark for the day or for the evening, Janaki, like your thoughts on the quantum computing and GPUs and all this accessibility and the real need of GPUs in the market.
Yeah, so interestingly, GPUs were not originally made for deep learning or AI.
I'm glad that you made this statement.
So
right.
It was, as they call it, was serendipity that just happened to be the most generic processor, and NVIDIA got it right with the hardware and software combination. But there are a lot of other things that are happening. For example, AMD and Intel are not sitting quiet. They are actually trying to utilize this opportunity, and they are coming out with very capable, viable alternatives, number one. Number two, there is certainly a need and an opportunity to create highly purpose-built and specialized processors or AI accelerators for LLMs, because LLMs is the third generation of AI. The first one was machine learning with linear regression. The second generation was neural networks. The third generation that we are experiencing today is based on transformers. So there is definitely an opportunity to build processors not based on GPUs, but processors that are squarely targeting the newer networks, right? The transformer architecture. So I'm not sure if you heard of it, but there is a company in US called the Grok, which has created what is called LPU, the language model based processing unit. So they are offering blazing fast inference, and they are not disclosing the price around it. It's currently being battle tested. But if Grok gets the supply chain right, and if they figure out how to actually get that out of their fabrication unit, I think it's going to be a pretty good alternative. So the forward-looking view is this is a very short-term opportunity that NVIDIA is cashing on, but that's not going to be the future. The future is purpose-built FPGAs and ASICs and accelerators squarely targeting LLMs and the upcoming models.
Sure.
I just wanted to say one more aspect. Sorry, I forgot about that. See, the cost of compute is going to come down. Take my word for granted. Empirical evidence suggests with online storage. But the bigger question that all of us collectively have, can you make Gen AI into Jan AI? Gen AI into JAN AI? And the responsibility of pivoting the Gen AI into Jan AI is amongst all of us. Some of us have to shoulder that responsibility and make that happen.
Absolutely. And on that note, probably I just want to say that the thoughts that you have shared today, not only extremely important, but I'm sure our startups and all of us would like to have further discussion in coming days. And as Shailesh has already experienced, like a lot of startups came to you, spend time with you, and in coming weeks, like Rajesh and Janki, we will also reach out to you so that we can get more such exciting discussion individually with you and our fraternity and ecosystem. And when we do such exercises, I'm sure, adding to your point, Gen AI is not far enough, and we will definitely reach there.
Rahul, consultants never say no to consulting work.
Absolutely. So with that, like I say thanks to all of you.
To stay informed about the startup ecosystem, subscribe to My Startup TV.